time as this.
And welcome to For Such a Time as This special edition, Genesis. We're going through Genesis. We are going to finish up Genesis 2 and then get to Genesis 3. Last week we had such a last week we had such much discussion. It took time to get through week 2, so we're going to finish up week 2 for those of you who are following along, and we're going to do a lightning round, and then we'll get to Genesis week 3. All right, so, Abby, we got to start soon. Anything you want to say before we get started?
No, I got nothing.
You've got
Sorry.
nothing. All right. Chapter 4, finishing up week 2 from last week. What, in Genesis chapter 4, what do verses 3 and 4 suggest about how mankind was now to approach God after the fall?
Okay, and this is question 14 for those who are following along.
Yes.
Okay. So that sacrifice, not necessarily a blood sacrifice, but some sort of sacrifice has now been instituted by God as part of the right way to approach Him after the fall.
Yeah, and we're not told exactly what the right way is, but we do now know that God has now prescribed which way you are to come to Him. In the course of time, Cain brought, verse 3, brought the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and the fat portions. The Lord had regard for Abel and his offering, but for Cain and his offering, verse 5, He did not. So God actually communicates and reveals to them which way they are supposed to now approach Him in worship after the fall. Question 15.
What can we learn about approaching God from verse 5?
We must approach God on His terms, not our own. Cain decided in verse 5 to approach God the way he wanted. It is the first recorded example of man-made religion. I'm not going to approach God the way I want. I'm going to approach God the way I want. And the Lord did not accept that. 16.
How did Cain react to God's rejection?
He was angry, and his countenance fell. It was a negative reaction with a negative emotional response. He was angry that God would not allow him to worship on His terms. And thus you see this over and over and over again all throughout mankind, leading even up to today. Question 17.
Do you think Cain was confused about the reason for God's rejection of his offering, or that he knew specifically why his offering was rejected?
If you look at the text, it seems like Cain knew exactly the reason for his rejection. God told Cain that if he would simply do what was right.
Implying that he already knew what was right, but he wasn't doing it.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. The Lord is referring back to some prior knowledge He had given Cain, and Cain ignored. Right? If you do what is right, you would be well. Implying that Cain, he knew exactly what the Lord was talking about. So.
Exactly.
Yep. 18.
So what does God's command to Cain to master his sin imply about our relationship towards sin?
And that's actually Genesis chapter 4, verse 7. Verse 7, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desire is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. In other verses, its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. That now mankind is now going to struggle with sin, but even in the struggle, he can actually overcome it. You say you shall rule over it. So you have sin, but you don't necessarily have to give in to it. There is a struggle there.
Right, and we can't let our emotions dictate our actions and behaviors. Now, I think we are all prone to this. We all do this. And sometimes it's hard to distinguish between emotions and it's hard to think straight when we're in the grip of strong emotion, I guess I would say.
Some more than others, yes.
Yes, but we all have to really try to master it.
Yes.
We need to get and knowing that, because our culture, the message is the exact opposite from our culture.
Just do it.
Right. If it feels good, do it. Whatever,
do it.
you can't help your feelings. Well, I mean, how many times have I heard that? You can't help your feelings. No, you actually can. We do have a lot of control over our feelings. Our feelings follow our thoughts. If we keep correcting our thoughts with truth, we will have more control over our feelings.
Yeah. Yep. 19. In verse 9, Cain was being flippant when he asked God, "Am I my brother's keeper?" What is the real answer to that question?
The answer is yes.
I think we are responsible for our brother's well-being, and yes, to a large extent, we are our brother's keeper. 20. Where did Cain get his wife? She was either a sister or a niece. There is no prohibition against marrying close relatives because at the time, it seems as though that the gene pool was not corrupted by sin to the point where it would lead to a lot of problems with marrying close relatives. Even in it comes to Abraham later on. Abraham and Sarai
Right.
were half brothers and sisters. So, yeah, the prohibition was not in place there. Verse 21. What do verses 20, 21, and 22 suggest about the idea that early man was primitive and unintelligent, just one step above the animals? Verses 20, 21, and 22 read as following. Adab bore Jabal, and he was the father of those who dwell in the tents and have livestock. His brother's name.
Okay, so they made tents.
They made tents.
Two things here.
Made tents.
And they
livestock.
raised livestock.
Yes, they were herders. His brother's name was Jabal, and he was the father of those who play the lyre and the pipe.
Okay, two things. If you're at subsistence level, you don't have time to worry about making music or the free time. You're just trying to keep body and soul together and get enough food on the table to stay alive. They not only must have had some free time, they actually created and learned to play musical instruments.
Yep. Zillah also bore Tubal-Cain. He was the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron.
So it was metalworking. They were involved in metallurgy. We're not talking about, this is so at odds with what we are told about early man. Of course, I suppose the evolutionists would say that early man was a long time before this, but the Bible says no. This is right away. I mean, Cain was Adam and Eve's son.
Yeah.
So the whole caveman dragging his wife around by the hair and wearing...
Fiction.
Yes.
Fiction.
Fiction, or people who got lost from civilization or for some reason were cast out.
I'll stick with fiction. I think it was fiction. Chapter 5. 22. What does the line of Cain, verses 20 through 22, seem to be noted for in contrast to the line of Seth? We have here material accomplishments. So material or worldly accomplishments, they were, it's recorded that they did in fact have those things, but nothing of the sort of relationship with the God of Adam and Eve.
And you skipped one of my favorite questions, Pastor James.
Did I?
Yes. Chapter 5. Genesis chapter 5. This is the one that I don't... Okay.
What's the question?
The question is, what does this genealogy suggest about theories that mankind has existed for tens of thousands of years on this planet?
That's my 23. What is that for yours?
Oh, that's my 22.
Yeah, no, mine is...
Oh, it's switched?
Yeah, mine is switched.
Ooh,
Yeah.
I'll have to check that. Sorry, everybody, if this is confusing you.
That's right. Go ahead, 23.
So anyway, here's a genealogy, and the Christians who believe in theistic evolution, etc., have no good answer for this because it's very specific. It says, when Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own image. He named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years. It's always Seth had lived 105 years, then he became the father of Enosh. When Enosh lived 90 years, he became the father of Kenan. So what they'll make this strange argument that, well, they're not actually fathers. We're talking about being a grandfather but it really doesn't matter because it says when they were 90 years old, Enosh, Kenan was born. There isn't any room for hundreds of years, let alone thousands or tens of thousands of years.
No, they're
here.
talking millions, right?
Well, no, I don't think at this point they are talking millions.
But I'm talking about the evolutionists.
Well, the theistic evolutionists try to make this to be like tens of thousands of years here in chapter 5.
But theistic evolution
not
is not necessarily what man. Theistic evolution is talking about what animals and stuff is the millions of years. But do they say man has been millions of years? I don't think so.
No, I don't think
so
they
you don't
do.
need. So you don't need. How long have they said man has been around?
Tens of thousands.
Tens of thousands.
I think.
Okay, not the millions.
No.
Gotcha. No, I mean everything in Genesis, it makes you choose between the history of the world according to the Bible or the history according to the world of man. And when I say man, I mean men who reject the word of God. So,
Right.
But anyway, all right.
Okay, that was lightning fast.
That was lightning fast.
You did it, Pastor James.
13 minutes. That was Genesis week 2. Now let's go to week 3, which covers Genesis chapters 6 through 9. Genesis chapter 6 through 9. Chapter 6. Genesis chapter 6.
The Nephilim.
Who were the sons of God that saw the daughters of men? This is a very, very hotly debated subject in Christendom. Who were the sons of God that saw the daughters of men? I think if you just simply take what the Bible says at face value, whenever the sons of God are ever referred to in the Old Testament, whether it be Job 1:6 or Job 2:1 or Deuteronomy 32:8, the sons of God were always angelic beings.
Right.
And I think it is contrary to us who live in this world to somehow grasp the notion that spiritual beings were cohabitating with humans. Sounds a little too Zeus-like. Sounds a little too much like Apollos and Hera.
And speaking of that, so where did that come from? Hercules was supposedly half mortal, half
demigod,
god, right?
yes.
He was a demigod.
Uh-huh.
And there were others.
And there were others.
Where did that idea come from?
Yeah, according to Jude 6 and 7, it refers back to Genesis 6. It says clearly these angelic beings did not keep their proper abode, and the sin that they committed was of a sexual nature. Go back and read Jude verses 6 and 7. But Abby talked about where did you get the legend of the Zeus or legend of the gods who would sleep with mortals. Look at the history. Look at the text. Noah gets on the boat with his wife and his 3 sons and his 3 grandsons. I'm sorry, his sons and his 3 granddaughters. They get on the boat. The flood happens. They get off and they start to repopulate the earth again. Those 8 people knew the world they came from. The world that they grew up in was the world of the Nephilims. The thinking goes like this. Once you come off of the flood and, your kids are going to ask, Mommy, Daddy, what happened? And so Mommy, Daddy tells them what happened with the Nephilims. Wow, that's the way it was. Because, I'm 15 years old. This is a big world. If I'm one of Noah's grandsons, and I'm thinking, there's only 13 of us here. What happened? And I think what the parents passed on to the children, once the telegram game, once you pass it on from generation to generation, things get a little muddled. Things get a little different, exaggerated. Things get a little off here and there. But the concept of having supernatural beings interact with humans and then have relations which then produce children, that legend now grows into the legend of Zeus, of Apollos,
Well,
of
Zeus.
Jupiter.
Zeus was thought to be a god, but it was. I think Zeus was supposed to be Hercules. I don't know my Greek mythology, but wasn't he supposedly Hercules' father?
Supposedly.
So
yes.
he, slept with a mortal woman and produced Hercules. So Hercules, if that has some basis in reality, would have been one of the Nephilim.
He would have been a half angelic being, half human.
Right.
He would have had supernatural strength. the men from world renown, right? The super beings, right?
They were the mighty men.
The mighty
men. So they weren't just ordinary children. I mean, the other thing, a lot of Christians will try to explain this, that these were the people born to the offspring of Cain.
Line of Cain. The line of Cain.
Yes,
yeah.
Intermingling with the line of Seth, but that doesn't make any sense here.
Yeah. So the writers, you would have to take the concept of the sons of God spoken of everywhere else, and change the meaning here in Genesis 6. Also, you'd have a problem, like we said in Jude 6 and 7. In which he was talking about supernatural beings committing sins, sexual sins, and that they were locked up.
Right. So Jude's words seem to describe this incident.
Yes, absolutely. And so the concept, so someone would actually say, how on earth can an angel procreate with humans? Spiritual beings can't come down and mate with humans.
Right.
And so the easy retort of that is, of course, spiritual beings can impregnate human women. Your faith is based on one such event, the Holy Spirit with the Virgin Mary. And we know that demons oftentimes try to mimic or try to copy what God does. But to say that spiritual beings cannot procreate with humans, that's simply false. Well, your faith is built upon the virgin birth, and it is possible. So, anything else?
Having said that, this is a very strange story to our ears.
Because of the world we live in.
Yes.
But I think the text, and again, the world that Noah was born in, the world that Noah lived in, was a completely different world than we experienced today.
Yeah, it must have been.
It was very, 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 very different, living until 800-900 years old on average. All right. That's our view of the sons of God. 2, what do we learn about the character of God from verse 6? Verse 6 reads as follows: And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. What is that? How do you take that, Abby?
He has emotions.
He has emotions, yeah.
I never really thought of God in that way. When I was an unbeliever.
Why not?
When I was an unbeliever, having emotions?
Why not?
No, he was more detached.
But you grew up Catholic.
Yeah.
You knew God had emotions, because every Catholic know that an angry God. You knew that, right? God was always angry at you.
I guess I never pictured him angry.
Oh.
I as a judge, absolutely, but I guess I didn't picture him. I pictured him as detached and uninvolved and just sitting up there with his big grade book in the sky, giving us bad grades.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that God is some supercomputer in the sky.
Yeah.
Who just simply, like a very sophisticated computer program, thinks.
Right.
Just thinks. He does think, but he also feels. And in this case, pain and grief he had over what was going on with sin in the world. All right. Was Noah, is the third question, was Noah spared from judgment because he was a good or moral guy?
Okay, I'm
Now, this
glad
is
we
not
got to
easy.
this one.
Yeah,
Because
we might not all agree on this one right here, but go ahead.
yes, because it says Noah was a righteous man,
Yep,
blameless in his time.
that's what it says. Why
That
do we have a problem with that?
that seems to indicate to me that he was morally superior to the people around him.
And why do you have a problem with that?
And I don't doubt that he was, but we want to say that Noah was righteousness. That it's more like no, and it is true that Noah was made righteous.
That's
through
not what
faith.
it says.
But that's not what it says.
Not what it says.
So I kind of want it both ways. Noah was not perfect. We know that.
Of course, that's not what righteous means.
Okay, well then you kind of explain this to me, because I might not have been answering this correctly all these years, Pastor James.
So okay, well, here's the thing. What do you do, Abby? With these are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in the generation, and Noah walked with God. How do you explain that? Why is that any different than Abraham? Why is that any different than David or any other righteous man in the Old Testament? Why do we have a problem with that? I can tell you why you have a problem with it, but go ahead.
I'm getting confused between being morally superior and imputed righteousness.
Now you say morally superior. What do you mean by that?
He was morally better than the people around him, and I have no doubt that he was.
So, okay, then why do you have a problem with it?
Is that the reason why God saved him?
Is that what it says? It just gives a description of who Noah was. It doesn't say he saved Noah because Noah in and of himself is morally righteous. Here's what I believe, and again, it goes back, and this is the age-old struggle between.
But the question is, was Noah spared from judgment because he was a good or moral guy? That's the question.
Not because he was a good or moral guy, but because he was righteous. Here's the difference. How was one made righteous in the sight of God now? It's the same with Noah.
Well, that's how I've been answering it.
But was Noah more moral, or according to God's standard, was he better or good? And the answer is yes.
Okay, so it's both. That's the way
how
I've
do
been
you?
answering
But how do
it.
you get there though? How do you even get to that point? Is it in and of yourself? The answer always is no.
Right.
Noah is the exact same way he was made righteous, the exact same way Abraham was.
And that's always what I say.
The exact same way with
We
David.
talk about this with women.
So he responded to God's grace, and in doing so, walked with God, had a relationship with God, and became a moral guy because he lived a life in responding to God's grace and obedience. So yes, he was. Christians today, if our moral standards and our moral acumen is the exact same as the world, I would say you have a problem. Christians should be different. Christians should have higher morals and better morals and better standards than the world. If you don't, that's a problem. But was he saved because of his own goodness? Is that what you're saying? Maybe we need to change that question.
Yeah.
I said, why wasn't Noah spared from judgment? It's because he was made righteous because he responded to God's grace. And see, I think this is where the age-old struggle between the Calvinists and the non-Calvinists, that somehow we have a problem saying that men are righteous. But at no point does anyone say men are righteous in and of themselves. I think men are made righteous because they respond to God's grace. And it says that he walked with God. That was the source of his righteousness. God was the source of his righteousness. God was the source of his righteousness and the source of his goodness.
I wonder if that means he walked with God in the same. He walked with God. Does that mean that he actually spoke to God like Adam and Eve did, like when they walked together?
That might be different in different concepts, but I think it's the same. It is the same language that 1 John picks up, right? If you say you walk with him, he's in the light. And if you say you walk with him, you walk in darkness, you're light, and truth is not in you. God is light, right? And so I think the whole concept, even back then, is the walking with God depicts a lifestyle and a a relationship in which you're moving with God. It speaks of the relationship aspect with God, walking
Yes.
with God. And so I think that's the same thing with Noah. Noah walked with God. He absolutely walked with God. And that never means perfection. Never. It just means the willingness to be in a relationship. And so that's why he was spared. He responded to God's grace. He did. And others did not.
Right.
And there's no indication that his wife did, and there's no
You're
indication
right.
that his son's or daughter-in-law did. He did. Noah did. So,
Yes. Agreed. We'll have to talk about that question later.
We'll talk about that question later.
Change it.
Question 4, in your opinion, was it likely that the people in Noah's day did not believe that God existed, atheism, or did they simply not believe that he would judge them? Discussion question. This is probably one of the most important questions we have in all the book of Genesis here. This is important because it speaks of judgment back then, and it prepares us for the judgment that is coming, right? Whenever I go through this, we spend some time on this question.
Right.
We
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
We
we
do.
do too.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there were any atheists back
No.
then. This was only 136 years after Adam's death.
Mm-hmm.
There were a lot of people still around
Mm-hmm.
who could have known Adam and spoken with him
Mm-hmm.
in person, and he would have told the truth clearly. Maybe Adam and Eve, Cain, all the people who were there first.
Mm-hmm.
That garden's still there.
Mm-hmm.
With the cherubim,
Cherubim.
with the flaming sword.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were doubting anything or you think this sounds like just some fancy story, well, you could go check it out
Mm-hmm.
in person.
I have no idea. I have no doubt that Noah used as one of the primary apologetics of his day. If you don't believe me, try to go walk in the Garden of Eden. For you all know, many of the people that was hearing the message that Noah was preaching, many of them knew Adam. Many of them at least knew Adam or knew of Eve. Many of them for hundreds of years could have gone and walked and saw it, Father Adam and Mother Eve. Could have easily.
Right.
Could have easily. These were people not too far removed from their context, right?
Exactly.
Um,
But it's just interesting that they have the same problem that people still have today.
Mm-hmm.
They just refuse to believe that God would judge them.
Yeah, maybe there were a few people who lived in ignorance, but it's willful ignorance. Because part of Noah's preach could have been, well, then go walk in the garden. Nah, I don't want that. I just don't believe you. That's willful ignorance.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, there's plenty of that.
You would have to work hard. You would have to work hard to be ignorant, right?
Right. But I do think it's the greater thing that people have a hard time believing is that God will judge them.
You think it
I
even
think
goes that far?
I think it's the same today.
I don't think they
There's
care.
all kinds of people who say who believe that God exists, but that's not the point.
At some point.
You can believe that your neighbor exists, but you don't necessarily trust your neighbor, right?
Yeah.
But I think you're right in that they just didn't care.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
think they
God
care.
exists, but I don't really care. And furthermore, this whole issue of judgment,
Yeah.
nah,
We'll-
that's not gonna happen.
We'll work out a deal if he really wants to call me to account. We'll work out a deal.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm basically a good person.
And 2 Peter actually addresses it when he says in chapter 3, he says that the scoffers will come in the last days. Well, I'm going to say the scoffers have always been here, but
I
maybe
think-
they're going to be a lot more
Yes.
in the last days.
Yes, and have they not grown in the last 2 years?
Oh yeah.
See, we have this running discussion, Abby and myself. I think these are the last days. I think this is the deluding spirit. Because if this isn't the deluding spirit that we're living through in 2022, how much more delusional can you get?
Yeah. So many people are so very deluded. It's
And
amazing.
it's amazing how bad it is.
It is.
It's amazing, mind-blowing.
A third of the country. I mean,
A third, please.
at least a third. The LA Times came out with an editorial yesterday or today that saying that they should still be masking the kids in California schools. What? They never should have masked them in the first place.
And they can do that after the Super Bowl with 70,000 unmasked adults indoors,
yeah,
including the mayor.
right.
It has nothing to do with health. Nothing.
Absolutely
Nothing. Nothing. It's nothing to do with health. It is just evil men starting a power grab. Okay, Genesis chapter 7. It has been said that whale bones have been found in the highest of mountain ranges.
Now, this is
Which
one
verse
that everybody
explains
has to
this?
have this question explained to them, and I'm not quite sure why.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
It seems really straightforward to me.
What do you mean?
They're confused by this question.
Who's confused by this question?
The women that when I'm in discipleship. Yeah, I pretty much have to explain it almost every time.
Are you kidding me? You're joking.
No, I'm not.
I never have to explain this verse. Never. Ever, never,
A lot
never,
I have to
never,
explain,
ever.
a lot.
Not one time. People love that. They're like, yeah, it's highest mountains. I don't think I've ever had to explain this. What are you trying to say at me?
I don't know what I'm trying. I just find that so interesting because the question seems so clear and the answer seems so clear to me too. It refers right back to verse 19.
It seems clear to us.
Where it says the water prevailed more and more upon the earth so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered.
Yeah, I can. I think I can
That's how you
safely
get
say.
whale bones on top
I think
of a
I can
mountain.
safely say that there's a 100% success.
Everybody gets that question right?
Everybody.
It's pretty simple.
Everybody. Yeah.
I don't know.
That's shocking to me.
I don't know.
Really?
I don't know if they don't know what the question's asking or
Seems pretty clear to in my
yeah.
dealing with the man. We're not making any assumptions here, ladies.
No, and I'm sure there are ladies that have no problem
Yeah, I'm sure about
at all
that.
with this question or scratching their heads like we are, but
Yeah, okay. What do you think about question 6? What do you think about the fact that God deliberately killed millions of people and animals, if not billions? What do you think about that fact? This is another very, very, very important question in Genesis. Very important.
and I've never had a bad answer to this.
Really?
Have you?
No. I've never had anybody who says, I struggle with this. I really, really struggle with this. I have a
Right, no.
problem with God doing this. I've never had that.
No, I have not
I've never
either.
had that. I've never had that. Because I think people, and let's put it this way, I think most of the people who come to New Hope, you're going to hear about sin, repentance, and judgment almost every week because we're in Hebrews, right?
Yeah.
And so you understand, if you're going to come forward to discipleship at New Hope Community Church, you pretty much have gotten,
God is God.
yeah, you've gotten the fact that there is judgment coming, because we say that pretty much every Sunday, because I think the scriptures say that, right? So I think when people get to our discipleship ministry like this, they've already heard enough sermons to where it's okay.
Right.
Judgment is and the way we preach is expository. So what we're doing is we're making our case from the scriptures. And if you accept that God is who he is according to the scriptures, by the time you get to this, you've heard it a million times, and you recognize that God is God. He is a righteous God who will judge.
And everything belongs to him.
Everything
he has every
belongs
right
to
to do
him.
with it what he
Yeah.
sees fit.
Yeah. And that and that it's right for him to judge. It is right for him to judge, to judge evil. And think about it. That's the type of God you would want. A God who is going to judge evil.
Right.
He's going to judge it.
And
You know?
you used to say something, I don't know, it's on the tip of my tongue. Oh, so obviously, you know, I have heard people say before, not in reference to this, not in reference to the flood, but of other things. Well, I just, they'll say something really awful that has happened, and they'll say, well, I can't possibly worship or respect a God that would allow this or that to happen. And I think you had a good way of handling that. Depending on the situation, yes, God judges. He has every right to do so. I forget exactly how you put it.
Refresh my memory.
But you, who's judging who here? You're going to judge. Are you going to judge God? You're sitting in judgment over God. Basically, God is always judging us, and that is as it should be.
Mm-hmm.
But when people say things like that, they are in essence judging God.
Of course.
But you had a really clever way, and I can't think of how you used to say it.
I'm sorry, I can't remember that either. I don't remember that either. I don't know exactly what you mean by that.
I don't know. My mind is not functioning at 100%.
He is the righteous judge, and he will judge. And he has every right to judge. Absolutely. Question 7. How is the account of the rescue of Noah and his family from the flood a picture of spiritual salvation through Jesus Christ? Where Peter tees it up for us very easily in 1 Peter 3, right? Mm-hmm. The flood the flood is a picture of judgment, or it's an example of judgment.
Yes, it is a judgment. Mm-hmm.
But it is also a picture of judgment to come. 1 Peter 3:18-22, the ark represents Jesus. Noah was saved by believing God and getting in the boat. We are saved the exact same way, by believing in God and trusting in Jesus, because there is a judgment coming worse than that of the flood. And the only way to escape the coming judgment is through the blood of Christ. All right, Genesis.
And the ark is just, I wanted to say, the ark is basically kind of symbolic of Jesus.
Yep.
So, in that case.
Yep. Chapter 8. What was Noah's first act after leaving the ark?
That's an easy peasy one. He built an altar and worshipped God with burnt offerings. That would be verse 20.
Yep. Right when he got off. 9. What did the Lord say he would never do again, regardless of how sinful man would become? He said he'd never again curse the ground on account of man, destroy every living thing with water. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Not that he wouldn't judge, but he wouldn't judge in the same way.
Not with the flood.
Not with the flood. And he hung something up there, symbolic of the judgment of Noah. Right.
And I heard someone once say that it's like hanging up your bow. That's an instrument. That's a weapon. And I don't know. I think you'd have to know the original language, which you do, and I don't.
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
But I thought it was interesting. I didn't know quite what to make of it, but. So that rainbow was like hanging up a bow in the sky as a symbol. The weapon is on the shelf.
No, I've never heard that. I've never heard that before. Okay. And in 10, what did God establish in verse 22?
Seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter.
Yep.
Day and night. So the seasons.
Seasons.
Yes. They shall not cease. So we will have those. I think about that sometimes when I think when things start to spin out of control. I look at the sky sometimes and I look around and I just think, well, this isn't going to change. This part isn't going to change. A lot of things are changing right now, but
you mean in
nature
this world
itself, in the sense,
yeah. Which everyone that knows. I believe that part of the season is because of the curse, and the specific season is winter. Winter will not be part of the. At least I believed that for a while. I'm not sure I believe that anymore.
I think snow is so beautiful. It's going to be somewhere, Pastor James. somewhere.
Snow is not beautiful, Abby. It's
Oh,
not,
come
it's
on.
not beautiful. Snow is not
Not
beautiful.
even at Christmas?
Adam and Eve were naked. They couldn't have been living in
No, I never said I
Chicago.
wanted to
They
live.
couldn't live
I
in
don't
Chicago.
like living in snow, but
They were never designed to live in cold like this.
it covers up all the mess too sometimes.
That's because of sin. So in a world in which there's no sin, you don't need to cover up anything.
Well, I still say it's
So you can say that there's not going to be any snow in the eternal state in heaven because it's evil and it's part of the
yeah,
fall.
but you're not sure of that anymore. That's what you just said.
No, I'm not sure of that anymore, but I still lean that way. I lean that way. All right, chapter 9. Chapter 9. What 5 decrees did God make to Noah and his sons after the flood? Chapter 9. 5 decrees that he made to Noah and his sons.
Okay, number 1 is to multiply and fill the earth.
That's verse 1.
That's verse 1.
Mm-hmm. Man would have dominion over the animals. However, the wild animals would now be afraid of people. That's verse 2. That's a reiteration of the dominion language he gave to Adam and Eve in Genesis 1. With the one part, now that sin is in the world, the one new wrinkle is that the wild animals will now be afraid of people. Some say that this will help the animals live and survive, and that man would have them for food. You know, one of the things, too, you mean help, the animals live and survive. I mean, if the T-Rexes and the crocodiles and the tigers wasn't afraid of man, it might have been the other way around, Abby.
Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of that.
Maybe that man.
I'm thinking more like rabbits and deer. And this
you
kind
think
of
of
thing.
rabbit. But Mr. Loch Ness, if there's no fear of man, Mr. Loch Ness may have wiped out humanity. I don't know. Maybe that was a protection not for the animals,
Right.
but for the men. Here's the third one. Eating meat is now allowed in verse 3. Oh, man, that really hurts my heart. That means, will there not be the eating of animal flesh in eternity?
Well, if there isn't, I don't think you're going to miss it.
Yeah,
Although
I guess
do
not.
love a good burger, I have to say.
Yeah,
I love a good burger.
Yeah.
And perhaps the earth had changed significantly after the flood, so it's possible that it might be a lot less productive agriculturally for them too. That they would need to eat the animals in order to survive. And it's interesting that, like, the Book of Enoch talks about one of the things that they were doing, which is it's an extra biblical Jewish book written during the intertestamental period. So it comes down to us from word of mouth.
Yeah, oral.
Oral
and
about
could
the
some
beginning.
of the stuff be true? Yeah.
Yeah, and it talked about that there was cannibalism before the flood, and they were killing the animals, and you could think if the animals weren't afraid of people, how easy would that be? And
Abby, I got to make a video here on For Such a Time as This. They show some of the rituals now of what's going on at the border. That some of the initiations of gangs is that you kill a man, open up his chest, and eat his heart.
Oh my goodness!
And it's mocking. They actually showed it on TV where they blurred out the stuff, obviously, but mockingly, as the guy's dying, he's offering the man his own heart as he's eating his heart. And so this is demonic stuff that is going on at the border.
Wow.
I mean, it's just open. It is open. So yes, the depravity that's going on. You look at it, it is demonic. It is absolutely demonic. And yeah, for God to come in and to wipe out all of mankind with the flood, they've had to be some stuff
really
going
terrible
on.
Stuff going on.
Right, some real nasty stuff going on.
That's horrible.
But number 4, eating blood was prohibited in verse 4.
Yeah, which is interesting because you think about so much of the horror genre revolves around blood, and there's just, I think there's something about blood that we don't even begin to understand in God's economy. But
But the
all
life
the
is in the blood.
demonic stuff
Yeah.
is people like drinking blood.
Yeah.
You know, got the vampires and
Yeah.
there seems to be an obsession with it.
Yeah. Blood. Bloody. Blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then along those lines in verses 5 and 6, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, capital punishment is, in fact, prescribed. It says in verse 5, 9, chapter 9, verse 5, and you and for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning from every beast, and I will require it from man. For his fellow man I will require reckoning for the life of a man. Verse 6, whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. Capital punishment is instituted for the well-being of humanity. Just look at Chicago. Just look at our culture now, where life is cheap and that murder is not held up as something abhorrent. It's just accepted as a way of life now. And our culture
it's a
is
command. And I've never understood these people who are against, and apparently, I mean, it's basically the whole country now, who are against
the death penalty.
Now, I do understand the argument that it isn't applied
equally. Got
and
it.
And it's
fix
not
that.
applied carefully.
Then fix that. But you
Right.
have to stop the idea that it's not a big deal.
Right. Because the way we treat murder now, it doesn't seem like a big deal.
No, it's not.
But if we had a just system
Yeah.
that instituted capital punishment, there would be a lot
So,
less people
Abby,
murdered. I am certain.
Christ comes.
Yes.
Millennial kingdom is set up.
Yep.
My view, I think our view, is the correct one. We'll come back and rule with him. If we're ruling in Chicago and your input is asked, how would you treat murder, first degree murder? What would you do?
With
I know what I would do.
public capital punishment.
Okay, you do public. I would do public also. I would do hanging.
Oh, you mean as far as the method?
Yeah, I would hang. And they say hanging is brutal, and it's not like the movie, then you're dead. Sometimes it takes a long time for him to die. And then the bowels loose and the urine loose, and he's sitting there scratching and eyes pop out. And that's what a real hanging is, and I'm like, all the better. That's the point.
There'd be a lot less murder, wouldn't there?
That's the point. You got to stop. You have to stop the murder. All right, look at verse. Question 12.
12.
According to the text, why does God put such a harsh penalty on murder? Man was made in his image, and you are destroying the image of God. You are defaming the image of God if first degree murder you commit. And that is the rationale behind it. You're made in the image of God.
Right. And let me just say really quickly here that a lot of people say that killing is wrong. No. Killing per se is not wrong. There's a difference between murder and killing. We kill in war.
Yeah.
People are accidentally killed, and God
Self-defense.
makes a distinction.
Yes, he makes
It's
a distinction.
very clear in His Word.
Yes.
And capital punishment also is not revenge.
No.
It's justice.
Yeah.
And there is a difference.
Yeah. Yep. All killing is not murder.
Right. We've gotten really confused about that, I think.
Yeah, I think the devil wants us to be confused. All right, 13. What does God promise in this new covenant He made?
Yeah, this
with
kind
Noah?
of repeated the other question. I think we can I did get rid of
Did you?
the other one. I did
didn't
because
have
it's
to-
pretty
oh,
much
oh.
the same.
Okay.
He
We
will
didn't say
never
it, though.
again destroy the earth with water.
Yeah.
2 Peter chapter 3 tells us He's going to destroy it
we
with
did talk
fire.
about it earlier. All right, 14. Why do you think God included this event regarding Noah and Ham in the Bible? This is a discussion question.
Because this is such a cryptic passage. About as far as like what really was this about?
Well, here's the point. I think when the Bible is only cryptic when we want more than what is given. God gives us what we need so he can get his
Right.
point across. The point wasn't what exactly did he do. The point is he sinned in a grievous way.
Yes.
And maybe, just maybe, he may have sinned in such a grievous way God didn't want to put it down. Just, we don't need the details.
Okay.
We don't need the details. We don't need the details. But it was of a heinous nature to the point to whereas it did what
Got
it did.
it.
So we're not sure exactly what Ham did. There's some speculation what he did, but the point is, sin. I mean, there's a few things. One, the people that got off the boat weren't perfect.
Yeah.
Noah was drunk, and he was a righteous man. And his son Ham, depending on how far you go or what happened, he could either be a very foolish son or an evil son. Depends. But I think God put it in there that even the most righteous fall, and that sin was still an issue even after the flood. So
Right. Even for those who had seen God's judgment up hand, and it was brutal.
Yep. To get off the boat and do this.
Right.
Right. So,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. How did Noah and Ham each sin? I think I talked about this a little
Yeah.
bit. Noah got drunk.
What Ham did, I mean, what we've been saying is it's not clear, and that's maybe it was so bad that God didn't even want to write it down. But I think it's interesting that Noah knew that something had happened to him when he woke up. So I don't know. It's not clear what exactly he did, but it was serious.
It was serious enough to the point that there was a curse that was put upon the grandson, his son, Ham's son.
Which also, I mean, so it talks about Canaan, because Canaan was Ham's son, and Canaan obviously was the patriarch ultimately of the Canaanites, who would be dispossessed of their land by the Israelites through God's instruction and his judgment.
And 16, is there any lesson we can learn from Shem and Japheth's example? Shem and Japheth demonstrated charity and mercy towards their father. They did not take delight in their father's shortcoming. Right. And they literally covered him up.
And that's a lesson for us. You don't expose people's sin for fun. In fact, you should cover it. I mean, that's why Matthew 18 is the way it is. You keep it. Try to keep it private as much as possible. Yeah. Unless it's serious enough or gets big enough or where you have to bring other people in. But you don't want to expose other people's sin. Be grateful that you wouldn't want your own exposed to all the world.
Correct. And true love covers sin. Covers a multitude of sin. And so, here at New Hope, we do practice church discipline. I tell people all the time, church discipline is not for sin, but it is for unrepented sin. And those sins that are confessed, dealt with, clarified, whatever, before it becomes public by leadership, is always a win. It's always good. No one relishes at the public disclosure of unrepented sin. It hurts. It's not good, but at some points it's necessary.
And it's difficult.
And it is difficult.
I mean, the Matthew 18 process is not an easy process, and that's on purpose.
No, it is on purpose. It is. Well, we did it, Abby. I think that's it.
All right, then.
We actually made it. Again, It seems like many of you are starting to look at it afterwards. We had a more uptake on the second week. People obviously are working during the day. Maybe they can't be here to do live, but by all means, if you all send us, you know what? Let me put up on a video. Let me put up an email address for us, and if for any reason you would want to email us and ask us a question, we'll address it right here for our contributors. We thank you. We thank God for you. We thank you that you have faith in us here at For Such a Time as This, as to support us financially. Please, 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 we want this to be a partnership. If you would, please email us an email and communicate to us what you would like to see, any questions you would like us to answer. We don't just want to you to be a financial partner. We want you to be a true partner. And so if you would, please just email us any questions, comments, concerns you have. We'll address it at this time. We'll address it in this segment or this podcast here for financial supporters, because we really, really, really do value and thank you for what you've done. Please email us if you cannot join us live. Email us and we will answer your questions here in this forum. Anything else, Abby, as we wrap up?
No.
Well, thank you.
I'm glad
all.
we got through it.
Yep.
We're getting better at that, keeping an eye on the clock.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all. Thank you for your support. And always, thank you for your trust and partnering with us. Thank you, and may God bless.
Yes, thank you.
Bye-bye.
For such a time as this,